Welcome to Inside ArtScroll, where the books that we read and the people that write them come to life. It's a pleasure and an honor to welcome all the way from Ramat Beit Shemesh, prolific author, Rabbi Nachman Seltzer. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Seltzer.
Aleichem Shalom. It's so good to be here with you. From Ramat Beit Shemesh to Lake to Rahway.
It's a short distance, one heart to another heart. Rabbi Seltzer, the book that we're going to be discussing, which is a compelling read, I literally couldn't put it down. It's fantastic, it's amazing, is a book about Hacham Baruch. Rabbi Seltzer, I never heard of Hacham Baruch. I'm an Ashkenazi boy in the Ashkenazi world. But once I started reading this book, I feel like I wish I knew him. But here's my question, just from the get-go. How does an Ashkenazi rabbi in Ramat Beit Shemesh get to write a fat, thick book about a Sephardi Chacham in Brooklyn? How did that come about?
So, first of all, if they had to choose someone to write a book about a Syrian rabbi from Brooklyn, if you go through all my contemporaries, I probably, for this particular book, the right person, because I grew up in that area, not far from Sha'ar Tzion. I grew up on East 7th and OMP in Flatbush, and right next to Bnei Yosef, and Rabbi Ben Shul, and really not far from Sha'ar Tzion. So I myself grew up in that community. Today it's much more Syrian, but then it was more Mir. But I grew up there, so I'm familiar with those people. I davened in Bnei Yosef. I used to go there in the morning with my father. So I knew the mentality. I grew up hearing the davening, grew up eating breakfast in the shul. So for me, it wasn't like something like out of the blue. I actually was familiar with it. But Legabe, how it started, one day I was going to America for a wedding, first time after COVID. Hadn't been in America for a few years. We all set to leave. The day before I'm leaving, so I get let's say a week before, David Ben-Haim, the Rabbi Hacham Baruch's son, got in touch with me about doing the book, and he got back to me, the day before I'm leaving. So I extended my ticket for a week, and I stayed in Brooklyn another week just to interview, dozens and dozens of people from the community, because everybody wanted to tell me their stories and share their memories about Hacham Baruch. He was like the Gadol Hadar over there. He was mamish he was the Rav in Sha'ar Zion. He was the man. Everyone respected him. He was beloved, beyond beloved. So everybody wanted to speak to me and tell me their stories. So it was an amazing week. And even when I came back, I spoke to a lot of people. But that's the background of how it happened. How an Ashkenazi boy from Brooklyn ended up writing a book about Hacham Baruch.
Absolutely fascinating. Just how many people do you think you spoke to before you started writing the actual book itself?
I don't know, 70, 80.
Wow. And then how do you decide what to put into the book once you have, 700 hours or whatever it is of content?
How did I decide? Look, I got to the point where when people would start telling me stories, I would say, okay, are you telling me this story? And I would just say, okay, don't tell me that story because I know that story already. By the end of the week, I was already doing that. So I would tell people, tell me your unique stories. So that's how we hone it down so that the interviews it's not just people telling me the same stuff. So basically, whatever people are telling me is mostly usable.
Let's jump right in. So we have Hacham Baruch. Talk to us about his humble beginnings, if you want to call it that. He was not born in Brooklyn. He wasn't born in Syria. Talk to us a little bit about his beginnings as a child, maybe as a bacher, and then we'll segue into becoming Hacham Baruch, if you want to call it that.
All right, so he was born in Yerushalayim. His mother was a Rabbanit. His father was the Rav. His grandparents, he came from a long line of Rabbanim, all the way from Baghdad. And they were, close to the Ben Ish Chai. They used to listen to the Ben Ish Chai's drushes. Mamash, very chashav Rabbanim, Mekubalim. And his mother took him when he was a little boy to Parat Yosef in the old city, and she told him, when you come into Parat Yosef, you're going to see malachim. And she meant that the Mekubalim learning there are like angels. And when he came in, he first was looking around. He was really looking for angels, and he was scared even to look at the people there. But he ended up staying in Parat Yosef for many, many years, and he ended up becoming chavrusas with Chacham Ovadia, with Ovadia Yosef. They were chavrusas and best friends, and the two of them would walk back and forth from Beis Yisrael to the Ir Atikah, and they would review their Gemara Baal Peh, both of them. And they were best friends, and they were Talmidim Muvhakim of Chacham Ezra Atiyah, who was the Rosh Hashiva of Parat Yosef. And they were part of what was called the Wonder Class. Their class ended up they went around the world. They did Kiruv, in the Sephardi world. They went around. Chacham Sion Levi to Panama, and Chacham Avadi went to Egypt first. Chacham Baruch went to South Africa first, but eventually they all became very, very big. Chacham Betzion Abba Shol was part of their chevra, and it was really like the Ades Mishpacha. It was really they called them the Wonder Class, not for no reason. They were the ones who kept the Sephardic world from, a lot of them went around the world and really were mechazik the communities, and he was part of that. But he was such an amazing, he was a person who would he knew, one of the things he did in Parat Yosef, he was the librarian in Parat Yosef. So every time a new sefer came, he learned it. He would learn it cover to cover. He could be on the ladder in the library, looking up a thing and forget he's on the ladder and be there for 5 hours. 5 hours later, he comes down the ladder. Ask him any sefer from the library, he knew where it was, and he knew what was inside it. He once told someone everything he learned was before he was 20 years old.
Which is so amazing, because he gets this incredible position of leadership, of trying to build a community. But the foundation of it is Torah in its purest form. To me, that was so inspiring. And I think all those kids out there who are under 20, you got to understand, guys, like you could become Hacham Baruch, but you got to give it all you have. And get on those ladders and read those Svarim and make them become part of you. Okay,
and walk back and forth from Borough Park to Flatbush saying Gemara Baal Peh. Do that. That's a big thing too.
And by the way, now I can understand why he was Chacham Ovadiah's Chavrusa. They both could look at a sefer cover to cover and remember everything that was inside of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's growing up in this insular community, from the Ashkenazi community in Beis Yisrael to Parat Yosef.
The community in Beis Yisrael was probably more Sephardi at that time.
Got it. And he himself lived in Yerushalayim also, correct?
Yeah, he grew up. Said Beit Yisrael was a Sephardi community. He's growing up Musrara. If you go to the Shukba, it's a Sephardi world over there.
Got it. But it's an insular area. It's Torah, it's learning, it's Gedolim, it's Kabbalah. Yeah. And then all of a sudden he leaves that behind him.
So then when he gets older, and eventually he gets, his chevra being sent out, and there was different job offers coming his way. His father said, you can't go to Egypt. And eventually, Chacham Avadi wanted him to come with him to Egypt. And Chacham Avadi went to Egypt, and he had a lot of tzaras in Egypt. It was terrible. He ended up doing a lot of jobs over there, and he had a lot of trouble with the community, and he ended up coming back to Eretz Yisrael. It was very hard for him in Egypt. But Chacham Baruch went to South Africa, and there he became the Rav in Cape Town, and he had a lot of stories over there in Cape Town. He also later, because he walked under the hot sun, later in his life he developed skin ailments. He had little marks on his skin because of that. But he did very well. The community loved him, even though it was an Ashkenazi community and he was a Sephardic rabbi. They loved him there. They wanted him to stay. And he ruled on mikvahs, and he ruled on. And there was a big story over there that there was a drought in South Africa, and the prime minister was the Syrian Israel. He, Beles Breira, with no choice, he sent a letter to the holy man, the Chacham Baruch was the Rav of the Jews, asking him to please have his people pray for South Africa, that the drought should be finished. And Chacham Baruch made a community-wide prayer service, and the next day there was a torrential downpour. It was on all the newspapers from in South Africa that the rabbi did this, and the next day the drought was over. And I don't know if it changed the prime minister's opinion of the Jewish people, but it was a huge Kiddush Hashem. And so he was there for 2 years. He did very well there, but his brother passed away, and he went back to Eretz Yisrael. And then again, other job offers came up, and there was he was looking into different job offers. One was in Iran, and there was another one in I think it was in Amsterdam, and then there was the job offer in New York. And Amsterdam was full of anti-Semitism. Iran was a problem because he couldn't get a visa because he was from Iraq, and then Iran and Iraq were enemies. So that left New York, and he ended up taking a boat to America, and where he became the assistant rabbi to Chacham Yaakov Kassin, who was the chief rabbi of the community in Brooklyn. And Chacham Yaakov Kassin right away chose him to be his son-in-law for his daughter Charlotte.
Which is amazing. How old was he when he got married?
In his 20s. Yeah.
And you can imagine the transition. Did he speak English at all when he came to the United States?
So he was in South Africa for 2 years, so he learned English.
Oh, correct.
Also, remember, when he was growing up, Yerushalayim was under the British.
And he spoke Yiddish also, correct?
Spoke Yiddish, he could daven l'chazan like a Litvish guy, he could learn like a Litvish guy. He could daven for the Amid as if he was coming out of Mir Yeshiva, and for fun, sometimes he would do that as for fun. He would do that if he was getting an aliyah, let's say in an Ashkenazi shul, like in the mirror, like he could totally prav like a Rosh Yeshiva. He could do it with the halachas like a Sephardi. He could do the lumdus like an Ashkenazi. He was holding in all the worlds.
He was ambidextrous.
Completely ambidextrous, and he would, let's say, when the koilo deal of Shlomo Diamond's koilo, he told me. We'll get into Shlomo Diamond. Today, Shlomo Diamond was one of the gedolim of the Syrians today in America. And Hacham Yosef Raful. And he told me, Rabbi Shlomo Diamond told me that he was when he was a young rabbi in Deal, so there was what's called a sabet. It's like a kiddush. They make a lot of sabbats, and he was invited to all the sabbats because he was a big rav over there. So he said that one Shabbos he went to a sabbat and he was trying to convince the guy who made the sabbat, the kiddush, to send his son to yeshiva. And he told him, "Your Rebbe his Rebbe was Rabbi Rosenfeld, was a Breslover person in America. He said, your Rebbe believes you got to go to yeshiva, and it's important." The kids, somebody spread a rumor that Rabbi Shlomo Diamond, he knocked the Sephardi Rabbanim and just said Ashkenazi Rabbanim are good, and it spread all over Deal. By Motzei Shabbos, people were swearing that there was a fist fight at the Sabbat, that somebody had to knock down Rabbi Diamond because he was knocking the Sephardi Rabbanim. The kids, Motzei Shabbos, Rabbi Diamond calls Hacham Baruch. Rabbi Hacham Baruch already heard about it. He says, "Come to me tomorrow." So Rabbi Diamond drives in to Brooklyn. He tells the whole story to Hacham Baruch. Hacham Baruch said, "Don't worry, I understand. Everything's fine." He made a phone call. He made 2 phone calls. That was it. That was his power. He was like the king. A one phone call, the whole thing was over. But so you think, okay, he's an amazing rabbi. He could give a halacha shir, but lumdus, like who says, So he told me when they would have him in the koilo, he would get up one time. Him and Rabbi Shweki told me they invited him to speak in the koilo, and he comes in there. He says, "What are you learning?" And they told him what they were learning, and he got up and he gave a shir. He just went piece after piece, quoting the Rabbi Kiva Egers, the Chasam Soifers, quoting all the raid, piece after piece after piece. And the Kohen was like, "All right, he's not just a rabbi, a community rabbi. He's like a Rosh Hashiva. He's pilpul. He's like mamish holy." He was as a Sher Brachas for Rabbi Nasser Sherman's son-in-law, Rabbi Sutton. He was at a Sher Brachas over there, and he gave a whole pilpul over there. Maybe in honor of Nassim Sherman, until everyone was like, "Okay, Rabbi, but we don't understand what you're talking about. Please, Rachmanis." But he was mamish holding. He could do that. He was really holding in all the worlds.
That's fantastic. Rabbanit Charlotte. So she grows up in the United States, at least part of her upbringing, and it's like the late 1940s. Growing up as someone that could be a Rabbanit for a gaon olam, a makubal. Like, how do you raise a girl like that? And tell us a little bit about the Rabbanit. That was something which was very fascinating because they produced this amazing mishpacha, and she was there behind him, and he makes this big impact. Can you share with us a little bit about the Rabbanit?
I don't know how Chacham Yaakov was so matzliach to raise a daughter like he did. I don't know, because it was very hard, because she had no friends, because she was the rabbi's daughter, and there was no one else who was from. But somehow she marries a person who was very from, and she ends up being mevatel herself legamri to him. Like, they never went on vacation. One time she convinced him to go to Miami. One time. After that trip, he said, "Never bring me back here again," he said to her. And she understood that they're not going on vacation together. If she wants to go on vacation, she's going with her friends, with her daughter, with her daughter-in-laws, with her sister-in-law. He's not going on vacation. He doesn't go on vacation. And she was mevatel herself to that, but that's, if you speak to her, to Rabbanit Charlotte, even today, you ask her, she was mamish on call. She was always she went with him to simchas every simcha, and he went to every simcha, and she was with him, and they went and our house was always open. It was always open. There was always, I spoke to a lot of the Rabbanim, the young rabbis, so today they're the rabbis, and they said, as a rabbi, they said, we would come to his house. Sometimes you feel the weight of the world is on your shoulders, and you come into him, and there's the slip covers on the couch. There's a bowl of M&Ms on like lentils on the table, sucking candies. There's a plate of vegetables in the kitchen, and the Rabbanit the house is always open. Come in, you come speak to the rabbi. You have some big problem weighing you down. You speak to him. He calms you down. He tells you what to do. He gives you good advice, and you leave a new man. But his wife was behind him in every step of the way. She was there. Like, it wasn't like it was mamash a partnership. And so his niece told me, so her name was Shani Cohen. She's married to someone named Ronnie Cohen. They live across from BMG. They were the first like Syrian family to move into Lakewood. They live right across from BMG. So she told me that she was by her aunt and uncle. And Hacham Baruch used to do the shopping. He would do the shopping. And he would come home with all the stuff. So one day they were in Deal across from the shul. They had a house across from the shul that the community built for them. And he comes in with all the bags. And he goes over to his wife. He goes, Charlotte, he says to her. He used to call, Charlotte, he says, look what I brought you. And he gives her this big chocolate bar. And Shani reminded her aunt of this, like, many, many years later. And her aunt was already, she's already older. And she's like, I remember he brought me this chocolate bar. And Charlotte says, with almonds in it. And he said, and the Rav was like, look what I brought for you. Charlotte. It's beautiful.
It is very beautiful. I wish we could talk about this for hours, because literally you could probably talk about it, maybe even for days. It wasn't all smooth sailing. Let's call it.
It wasn't what?
Spade. Always smooth sailing. There were definitely challenges and problems. Share with us, I don't know, at least one challenge that jumps out at you that the Rav had to contend with to be able to maintain his position and das Torah, etc.
There were many challenges. Remember, the community was not like it is today. Today, the community is a tremendously growing community. It's like I call the Syrian community, it's the sleeping giant. People don't understand. In 20 years from now, this community it's going to eclipse. I don't know what's going to happen here. I can tell you right now, if people don't understand what's going on Ocean Parkway alone, there's like 5,000 people learning every day. Just in the Syrian shuls alone. If you go into Shari Tzion today, you have 2,000 people let's say 1,500 to 2,000 people learning every day. On Shabbos, there's between 2,000 and 3,000 people who come to learn there. Every morning before davening, you have thousands of people. People don't understand what's going on. It wasn't like this 50 years ago.
Forget about Lakewood is huge in terms of the Syrian community.
There's 1,000 Syrian families in Lakewood today. People don't understand what's going on. So, but it wasn't like this. Nobody was from, and he comes in and he has to work with this community, and he has to he has to work with them slowly. Rabbi Yaakov Kassin, Chacham Yaakov Kassin had this mahalach of you work slowly with them so that they don't run away. Like you could force them to do things, and then they're gonna go to reform. So you have to work with them. But one thing they were very, very makbid is something called the takana. The takana was started back in Argentina, and the idea was that nobody from the Syrian community is allowed to marry a geirus or a ger, and if you do, you're out. Your kids aren't going to go to schools. You can't be part of the community. And the idea was because they were afraid of intermarriage. And by the way, that insistence on being makbid on the takana, which they redid a number of times through the years, is what saved that community. Like, in essence, if the Ashkenazi would have done such a thing, who knows what, maybe a lot of people wouldn't have married out. Again, it's halacha. Chacham Avadia argued with him on this. But he stood his ground, and his father-in-law stood his ground. And that was a big thing, because a lot of times people, he would hire private investigators to fly out to different places to find out the background of people, their mothers, their grandmothers, and every person who got married had to come to him before, and he would write down in his book who their father was, their mother, their aunt, their grandparents, their ancestry, what day was the wedding. There's books of records. He knew every single person in the community and who their grandparents were and who they were, and that way they were able to avoid tremendous amounts of intermarriage, and it kept the community strong. And everyone married Syrians and everyone married Jews. So that was one very important thing, and they were very makbid. They wouldn't bend.
Amazing, fascinating. Could you share with us what fact, what story, what episode shocked you the most from those 100 people that you talked to? What was the most meaningful moment?
I'll tell you a story that I loved. I mean, there's so many stories. Really, I enjoyed writing this book so much. It was a great book, and the family's like, when I'm leaving, I get this question a lot when I'm writing a book. The family says to me, how are you going to do this? How are you going to capture? You never met him. How are you going to capture him? Like it's so hard for them to understand. I'm like, look, you'll wait and see. Baruch Hashem, they're very happy with the book. But again, when you do so many interviews, you eventually get a feeling of who the person was. You really do. Now, he was not like Chacham Avadia. Chacham Avadia, everyone knew when you go to him, he could give you a slap. It was a slap of endearment. It was like a badge of honor to get a slap from Chacham Avadia. Chacham Baruch didn't slap people. But I can tell you one story. Somebody came to tell me. I was staying by my friend Alan Estes on Ocean Parkway. I became friends with him. I stayed by his house when I was doing this project. And every morning, people would come to his house by breakfast. Mamish, my day started very early because we got in as many people as possible as we could get in. People would come after davening, join us for breakfast. And one guy comes in, he tells, I want to tell you a story, he says, I'm a Kohen. So one day I go to Hacham Baruch and I say, Rabbi, I have a question. He said, what's the question? He says, I'm a Kohen. And I want to know, there's a disco in Manhattan, and I want to go to the disco in Manhattan. Hacham Baruch's like, why are you telling me this? Like he's thinking, like, why are you telling me this? The guy's like, I want to go to the disco in Manhattan. But the problem is that the disco is in a church. And from what I understand, some churches buried people in the basement of the church. So as a Kohen, I want to know if I'm allowed to go to a church so I can go to a disco. Hacham Baruch is looking at this guy like he's off his rocker. And he said his response, he gave him the only response he could give him. He slapped the guy across the face. The guy told me that he slapped me into sanity. It was the only response he could give me. Like, what, you don't understand? You're asking a rabbi if you go to a disco in a church and the only thing you're worried about is that maybe there's dead people in the building? Today, this guy is a Marbitz Torah in Flatbush, in the Syrian community, but all because of that one slap. And I didn't hear from anyone else. He didn't slap people, but that was the one. That guy needed a zetz, and he gave the guy a zetz, and he punched and zetzed him, and it became a Erl Chayid. You know? Like, it's not like when we were growing up in yeshiva, we got petched. This guy needed a zetz to become who he could become. And Hacham Baruch understood he needed it. And he gave it to him. He never did this to anyone else. Everyone else got a, how you doing, or this or that. But that guy, and to me, it was like a Mardika story. I blew me away.
Fascinating. Rabbi Seltzer, this has been so amazing, such an interesting conversation. I highly recommend that everyone go out there and buy the book, but I just want to warn you, make sure you block out some time, because if you pick it up, you're not going to be able to put it down. Rabbi Seltzer, you should have continued Hatzlacha and Siyata D'Shmai to keep cranking out high-quality books, fascinating books, and inspiring Klal Yisrael one person at a time.
Amay, thank you. I just want to end off that the one great thing about Chacham, there's many, many facets of Hacham Baruch, but one of the great things was that, and this kept on coming up, and with this will end, was that he was a person that you could ask the same question to him, and he would give a different answer to every single person, depending on that person. Like one person, like I'll give you an example where somebody's on a bike. He was very against bike riding on Shabbos, of course. But he sees a guy on a bike, and the guy says to him, Good Shabbos, Rabbi. And he says to the guy, Good Shabbos. And he sees a guy, on a bike, and he says to the guy, what are you doing? Why are you on a bike? And people ask him, what's the difference? And he says, this guy used to be in a car, and now he's riding a bike. He gets a Good Shabbos. This guy used to be a yeshiva bacher, now he's on a bike. He doesn't get a good shot. He gets a musa shmuz. So, meaning that was the way, because he knew every person in the community and he understood them. He knew where they were holding. He knew their psychology. He knew their brain. He knew how it worked. He knew their family. He was able to work with every single person on an individual level. And today the community is an unbelievable giant, making tremendous strides in Torah, Avodah, and Yeres Hashem. And it all started, a lot of it, tremendous amount started from Hacham Baruch Ben-Haim.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Hatzlacha. Thank you.